for the project, and I'm going to kick us off here with a brief agenda. So we're going to start out by introducing our project team. We'll then go into project overview and goals. Then going to pass it over to Adam Lind, who will talk about the proposed improvements, trail and roadway detours, project funding, project timeline. Then we'll follow that up with feedback opportunities for the community, and then questions and answers. So, all right, so we have most of our project team that's listed on the screen here on this meeting today. So first we have Adam Lind, the Trails Program Manager for Denver Parks and Recreation. We also have Jason Wennen, who's a project manager for the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. We also have Will Barkman, who's the project manager for the Mile High Flood District, who is a project partner for this project. Along with me from Jacobs, the design engineer, we also have Matt Chambly, who's our environmental planner. And then we have Cassie Caslon, the landscape architect from Valerian. So this slide, we just want to highlight to everybody where this project is taking place. So we call this project Sanderson Gulch from Florida Avenue to Arkansas Avenue. It's really a little bit upstream or south of Florida Avenue to a little bit downstream or north of Arkansas Avenue. So the project will generally follow the green dashed line. That's kind of the limits of the project along Sanderson Gulch Trail. And on those same limits, we'd be doing channel improvements, roadway improvements, utility improvements to meet the project goals and objectives that I'm going to talk about on these next couple of slides. So we wanted to highlight the purpose and need for the project. Then we can jump into the goals and then the proposed improvements. So this project really started with a goal to replace an existing in-stream structure that is failing. But it's grown to be a much bigger kind of multi-objective project. And we'll highlight some of those other purposes and needs here too. In the existing conditions, there's multiple homes that are within the 100-year floodplain. And that same 100-year floodplain also overtops the roadway crossings at Florida Avenue and Arkansas Avenue. In addition, both the culvert crossings at Florida Avenue and Arkansas Avenue have identified structural needs that need to be addressed. So that works well with the kind of ties into the other project purpose and need here. The Sanderson Gulch Trail through the project area also does not meet the current standards. And there's a substandard undercrossing or underpass at West Arkansas Avenue. And I'll highlight that in a couple of slides here. In the existing conditions, there's no undercrossing at Florida Avenue. And then we also see that there's a lot of opportunities just to enhance Sanderson Gulch itself, focusing on stream function and aesthetics. So building upon those identified needs, our project goals really tie directly to that. So the first one is we're proposing to replace the undersized culverts at Florida Avenue and Arkansas Avenue to pass that 100-year floodplain. So instead of the 100-year floodplain being over the top of the roadway, it would be through the culverts. And along those lines, we're also proposing improvements to the channel. And then along with the roadway culvert improvements, we would reduce the floodplain limits, both the extents and the depth of water, to reduce the flood risks for homes along that floodplain, such that those homes would no longer be within that 100-year floodplain. So next, we want to construct new full-sized per criteria underpasses at Florida Avenue and Arkansas Avenue. We want to widen the trail, the Sanderson Gulch Trail, to meet current standards. As I mentioned before, we want to enhance the Sanderson Gulch corridor, which will include replacing the existing failing grouted riprap drop structure And then finally, we want to improve pedestrian mobility with wider sidewalks on Arkansas Avenue and Florida Avenue. So for those familiar with the project area, I'm sure you're familiar with these. And if not, what I'm highlighting here is on the left side, that's the existing roadway culvert crossing at Arkansas Avenue. So on the image here, the flow is in the left culvert, and then the right culvert is the undercrossing culvert, which is only about 6.5 feet tall in the current conditions. And then on the right side, we see the Florida Avenue culvert, looking from upstream to downstream here, that shows the existing arch culvert and no pedestrian undercrossing at this location. So at Florida Avenue, there is an at-grade crossing. We also wanted to highlight a couple of photos of just the gulch itself and then the trail. So on the upper left is the existing failing structure that we've mentioned a couple times. The photo at the bottom just shows the kind of the current condition of Sanderson Gulch. So there is some bank erosion, just generally not a lot of variability in the stream or the habitat. And so we think there are a lot of opportunities to improve the Sanderson Gulch stream and the corridor itself. And then the upper right photo shows the Sanderson Gulch Trail, which in this section is an asphalt pavement trail that doesn't meet the current width standards. So we wanted to also provide a quick update on the environmental side of the project here. So the project is following a federal environmental review process according to the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA for short. The NEPA is required for this project due to the federal funding that the project has received to help support the construction costs. For this project, the Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, is the lead federal agency. So with this project, we are not anticipating any significant impacts to the natural or human-made environment. And our project team is preparing what's called a categorical exclusion, or CE, documentation. And Federal Highway Administration will ensure that all the NEPA requirements are met before approving that categorical exclusion. We also wanted to highlight, related to the Sanderson Gulch Trail, that public recreational trails are protected under the Federal Transportation Law, Section 4F of the US DOT Act of 1966. And so our project, the Sanderson Gulch Improvements Project, would relocate and enhance the trail. We'll also provide detours during construction, and we want to make sure that we invite the community to comment on the trail improvements and the proposed detours. And so FHWA will review the public comments before approving the CE and making a final Section 4F finding. So there's a lot of technical language in there, but the key here is if you have any questions, please raise your hand or type a question in the chat, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. So I'll pass it over to Adam to lead us through the proposed improvements.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So yeah, as Aaron mentioned, the existing culverts are undersized, and the pedestrian culvert at Arkansas is usable if you're a small child or if you crawl or duck through there but doesn't meet ADA requirements. You can see this picture on the right from the rains last summer. That culvert, the gulch is pretty much filling up through the culvert on both sides and spilling over, making that pedestrian culvert completely unusable. So one of our goals, as we mentioned, is to upsize these culverts to be able to handle bigger storms, and also design the pedestrian culvert to be ADA compliant, to be usable for both people walking and bicycling, and also be functional during certain levels of storms. There'll still be a level where it overtops and fills, but not at the same level that it is today. So in addition to improving the flood conveyance and the trail improvements, which we'll touch on as well. Also looking to improve the aesthetics and the stream function of Sanderson Gulch. So the ultimate design will have some new sinuosity. So instead of the gulch just kind of being a straight line from north to south, introducing some curvature in the stream, trying to deepen the channel a little bit to provide more water regularly so that there's more habitat environment and other improvements as well. Again, here's just another picture of that storm from last year, kind of overwhelming or almost overwhelming the culvert at Florida. So we'll show some cross sections for the trail improvements in a minute here that meet Denver Moves Everyone, which was a big publicly led transportation improvement plan that also included trail improvements as well. ADA curb ramp upgrades at all the street crossings and making sure all the trails are ADA compliant as well. Exists improvements to storm sewer and drainage infrastructure, and also roadway improvements. As Aaron mentioned, some of these culverts need to be replaced anyways. They're reaching their maximum lifespan. And so as part of needing to replace them, we also wanted to make those trail improvements to improve pedestrian safety, safe routes to schools, safe routes to parks, and just making it easier and safer for everybody to move through the neighborhood on bike and foot using the trail. So I'll talk about this slide kind of from south to north.
Adam, sorry to interrupt. We have a question, and I don't know if it's something that might be going through the presentation. It's what is a CE? And so
Yeah.
if we're going to use the acronym throughout, I just want to make sure that we clarify what that is. That way people are able to follow.
It's not mentioned for the rest. We'll circle back on it and can move back to that slide at the end of the presentation. Thanks, Jesus. So yeah, so looking at the map kind of from south to north, the orange line represents the new trail alignment. So generally in the same corridor, but where, sometimes today it's on the south or east side of the gulch, it might be moved to the west side of the gulch. We'll have some new low water crossings, which are small bridges to get people from one side of the gulch to the other. The blue line represents the new stream center line. So as mentioned, adding a little bit of curvature to the stream and sometimes shifting it a little bit out of its current alignment. The yellow boxes represent the new culvert. So that's kind of how the roadway gets over the stream, and also where we'll be building those pedestrian underpasses to improve mobility and safety. And yeah, so that pretty much covers it. If you are from the neighborhood on the south end, you're probably familiar with the project that I believe was completed last year. Added some new pollinator gardens, some crusher fine trail, and did some new paved trail. So we're kind of tying into that project on the south side. And on the north side, there's the new playground and also new trail improvements and Sanderson Gulch Dog Park that also finished. So that's kind of our northern limit and where we will be tying into as well. And in between there is gulch, stream, bank, and trail improvements through that corridor. So this is kind of just a broad view of typical cross-section, the gulch and stream improvements on one side, and then the proposed trail. Right now, it's anywhere between 8 and 10 feet of asphalt. So we'll be replacing that with a 10-foot concrete trail and a 3-foot crusher fine trail with shoulders on both sides, which meets the Denver Parks and Rec standard cross-section for a collector trail, which is what Sanderson Gulch is, since it more or less feeds you into South Platte River Trail. So this is kind of just a 2D view of that, and we'll show a 3D view next. So this is your view. If you're at Arkansas, I want to say this is looking south. So going into the tiny steel metal corrugated pipe. And then Aaron, if you can show them what kind of the new section will look like. So a pretty big change here, right? So the trail itself moves from the right side of the gulch to the left side. You can see there's the pedestrian underpass over there as well. You can see there will be some small retaining walls in places, working through the details of those elevations through design. Really creating that new kind of environment, both for people experiencing the gulch, for cars going over the top. You really won't notice any difference as you drive across Arkansas or Florida Avenue. But as you're using the trail and crossing underneath, you'll notice a big improvement. And then same kind of model, but looking overhead. So you can see, where the gulch will be going through that culvert. There's the trail underpass, and then on the other side is this trail is more or less the connection from the street. So it represents the ramp that'll tie down to the trail. We don't want people to be trapped. If the water does get high, we don't want people to be trapped without an option to cross the street. So there's both the underpass option and an at-grade option. Obviously, if you're coming from the neighborhood and you need to access the trail, you'll access it from the top of the street. And this is generally what it'll look like both for Florida and Arkansas. There'll be at-grade connections and underpasses. And this is Arkansas as well, kind of just a pulled out, zoomed from above model of the same one we were just looking at. So now, Aaron, if you want to go back and kind of just show the current and future, you should be able to just use, go back one more. So this is kind of what we're looking at today. You can see the steep banks there leading down to the gulch, not very well defined asphalt trail going to the non-ADA compliant, very small underpass, and then what we're proposing the future version will look like. And then this is just the overhead view. So that is pretty much what we're looking at for the improvements. In terms of funding, we started this project in 2023, and we expect design to last through 2026, about $2.5 million. Our current construction estimate is $18.5 million, lasting from roughly 2027 to 2029. And there's 3 project partners on this project, both DOTI, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, DPR, Denver Parks and Rec, and MHFD is Mile High Flood District. So we all have various interests in this project as well. And we, as of right now, we have a $4 million Protect grant from FHWA, and that's really focused on sustainability and resiliency. And so with our project goals of raising the culverts and the trail out of the floodplain, making them more resilient to more storms, we were able to acquire that grant, and it's $4 million of local money as a match, and then $4 million of federal money. So this is where our estimate and funds are coming from at this time. Touching on project timeline, we're kind of here in the middle in October of 2024, just completing our 60% design and doing this public outreach meeting. At this point, the biggest kind of hurdle for us is the floodplain modeling and analysis, and we're hoping to get what's called a no-rise. So basically, we're not increasing that water elevation, and that means this note at the bottom that says 60% design may include permitting that takes 12 to 18 months. If we're able to get a no-rise, then we're able to kind of bypass that long step. There's still review and approval that has to happen, but it's a different process that isn't as time consuming. So that'll help us, and we feel fairly well that we'll be able to meet that goal, and that'll help us stay on this timeline. So we've got our public meeting, we'll take comments, we'll do our own internal city review, and from those comments, we'll keep pushing towards 90% design and kind of finalizing the elements of the project. Likely sometime next year, early 2026, we'll come back to you all as the public and say, hey, this is what we heard. These are our final changes. This is what we're planning to build. These are any potential impacts, and then finalize design and then move into construction. Did want to note, since we are working within a stream and a floodplain, that our construction season is really limited to October to April. So that's what the city calls the low flow season. when we're less likely to get big rainstorms and less likely to have liabilities and risks from big floods getting into equipment in the gulch or causing up a lot of erosion and sediment movement. So the construction phasing and season might move and shift in terms of where we're allowed to work within the whole limits of the project. So you can move to the next slide. Thanks. So we did specifically want to talk about trail detours here. Again, as Aaron mentioned, this is part of that NEPA environmental process. As the trail is a protected resource, we need to make sure that we're not just removing it or just telling people we're not showing them how to get from point A to point B while there are closures going on. So detours will be required during construction, and our current plan is to phase that construction, especially of the underpasses, so that we can minimize impacts to users and make the detours easier to function. So we'll aim to detour a trail to a trail as much as possible. So we don't want to have families and kids somewhere where they feel safe and then just say, go bike on Florida, good luck. That's not really safe and not really best practice. So we will be finalizing those detour routes with our construction contractors when we get there and talking about if there's any temporary improvements that need to be made, but they'll be responsible for managing and snow plowing the detour throughout construction. So we're going to move to a few slides that look similar but are slightly different in terms of what they're discussing. So this map, the purple line more or less shows what segments of the trail could be closed while we're building the underpass at Florida. And so the plan would be, utilizing sidewalks and low volume neighborhood streets for the first bit from the south, and then getting you onto that 8 to 10 foot trail that runs along Florida Avenue, not in the street, but adjacent to the roadway behind the curb, to move along that corridor. And if you're going to South Platte, you kind of continue and tie in there. And if you want to get to the playground or the dog park, we'll be looking at routing either up through La Pan, or because that's where an existing curb ramp is, or there may be other opportunities mid-block that people can choose, but we'll kind of come up to create one dedicated route that has all the signage on it and kind of take you over to the dog park and to the playground. So you can move. This one is kind of for staying on the trail that way. This one is focused on the same street closure. So the same thing at Arkansas, at Florida, when that underpass is being built. But, let's say you're going west and you don't want to take a whole giant loop to get around. You could use these lower volume neighborhood streets to make those connections down to Zuni to then keep heading to the west. So those are kind of the two that we're looking at for currently right now for the Florida closure. And then the next one will be for the Arkansas closure, which is pretty similar to the Florida closure. But instead of detouring people further south to use Gunnison to get up, at this point, if you can imagine that underpass is built and the ramps are built, you'd be able to just start right on that trail adjacent to Florida and use that to get around. And if you're going, same thing, from the north or the west, you can choose to do this or use neighborhood streets. Louisiana is a little bit more higher volume, so it's not as easy to detour people that way. So this might be the only recommendation once Arkansas is under construction, but it'll really come down to the phasing, and there might be kind of different elements of where you can tie in and make connections as the project goes to construction and is phased. So this is where we are on the trail detours. Also is going to be roadway detours as those underpasses are under construction. Same thing. So if you live very close to the closures, the green represents kind of a soft closure. So through traffic wouldn't really be encouraged to go through there. But if your house is in that section between, let's say, green and red, you would be allowed to get through there. Or if you live off one of these side streets, Raritan, you can get in that way. But for the main traffic, we don't want them using all of the neighborhood streets to get through. We try and detour a collector to a collector or an arterial to an arterial. So Most of the detour will be routed on Jewel, Zuni, Louisiana, and South Platte River Drive. So again, these will be phased depending on, when Florida's closed, Arkansas should be open, and when Arkansas is closed, Florida should be open. So the detours might change, but all this will be signed both for vehicle detours and bike and pedestrian detours as well. So yeah, in terms of feedback, any Q&A tonight, we can get to some of those questions in the chat. We'll post the presentation and the video online. Same thing, they'll all be posted on the website. So here's a easy, tiny URL that you can remember. If you get to the PDF, these are links that you can click on. Please email any and all questions to me. My email address is here. And we'll leave that comment period open until Friday, November 8th, which is about 3 weeks for review and comment. And yeah, I think that wraps it up. And so we kind of have 2 slides here. One says Q&A for trail improvements. The other one is for general improvements. So we can have any questions. And Aaron, I guess if you want to go back to the CE, to the NEPA piece, we can answer that one to start.
Yep.
And Matt, I don't know if you want to take that, or I can try and take that as
Sure.
well.
I'm happy to answer. So when there is, sorry. So when there is a federal funding or federal oversight on a project, there are different levels of class of action or types of documentation for NEPA. And the categorical exclusion is sort of the lowest level when you did not anticipate a lot of significant impacts to the human-made or natural environment. And then it steps up from there to like an environmental assessment and so forth. So the categorical exclusion is just a name for the level of documentation that federal highway requires for this type of project.
Thanks, Matt. And so for a lot of our bicycle and pedestrian projects, trail projects, CE is kind of the norm. You think about a big like highway project going through a greenfield or a big rail project going through a big city, like that gets higher up on the, I guess, requirements and level of effort for getting that NEPA approval. So for now, Jesus, we will turn it over to you to MC the questions.
For sure. And we just got a question from Jace that came in about the reason for flipping which side of the gulch the trail will be on. It seems like it might create more of an impact.
I will leave that to Aaron or Cassie.
I can take the first pass at that. So yes, we looked at both alignments of the trail, both on both sides of the new culvert, and what we found was that moving it to the west side at Arkansas there is easier to make sure that we are maintaining the ADA accessible grades. And we're also working around all of those existing power poles in that area. So moving it to that side really gave us a little bit more wiggle room to make sure that we were getting the trail in there with the ADA grades. I don't know, Aaron, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie, for that response. I think the other thing is just to note, and maybe I could go to this slide. We are trying to fit, we're trying to fit a much, or actually, two new box culverts in there that are larger than the existing box culverts in that location. So there's a lot going on at Arkansas Avenue, and as Cassie said, this worked best with the new culverts, the new underpass, and then the ADA grades to have it on the west side.
Okay, hopefully Jace that was able to get it. This is not a direct question, but just something aspirational from Allison. She does use the trails quite a bit, but she does mention that she would love for Sanderson Gulch Trail to connect directly to the South Platte Trail. Um, and just to clarify, that is not within the scope of this project at all, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So definitely aspirational, Ellison, but just wanted to make sure that we address it. She does thank everyone for the work that she's doing. So thank you very much on that. Um, back to Jace, he's asking about will there be a PED underpass? Or excuse me, if the PED underpasses will be lit.
Yeah, both underpasses will be lit, and we're also going to be adding some solar lighting along the trail as well. So something new for DPR, but all of our new projects are going to include solar lighting along the corridor. So the existing kind of density of that lighting is still TBD, but yeah, we'll definitely be improving lighting and safety usability throughout the cold winter months when it gets darker earlier along the whole corridor.
Um, and then just kind of back to that South Platte conversation, because a question did come in uh, by Jay, if anything can be done to add the connection to South Platte to this scope of work.
No, not at this time. It's definitely kind of a long-term aspirational goal. We could see a little bit to the east. There's a few existing buildings and a rail line and the river that we'd have to get over. So not that it can't be done, but the engineering cost of that is pretty large to do that and make ADA accessibility and connectivity with that. So it's not something that we're currently looking at doing with this project to really have the scope or budget for that.
Uh, Ellison made a comment about the pollinator gardens that were installed last year and just how much they're appreciated. Uh, is anything like that part of the scope of the work going on here, Adam?
Yeah, Cassie, do you want to talk a little bit about seeding and restoration and all that?
Yeah, definitely. So we currently do not have like the designated pollinator gardens planned for this area. However, we will be using a lot of the native plant species, and that does include native pollinators, as well as variety of the native grass species and flowering plants that will kind of promote that continued pollinator experience throughout all of them, but we currently don't have any designated garden areas.
Hedman, and I'll just say it like that. I don't know if you pronounce it German. Uh, is there any way that we can get access to the trail at Raritan or Seneca?
That's definitely something we can look into and figure out exactly if you can follow up kind of where you would be anticipating some of those potential connection points. That's something we can look at and see what the feasibility is. Not exactly sure where we'd be tying in there.
Sorry, Adam, is that something where you would want uh, Hedman to give you some more information, or is
Yeah, if you can just email me with like a Google screenshot. Oh, you're
so?
on the north side, I think there.
Yeah, yeah, like that intersection between Riverton and Arkansas, like that little, just like a house or like a big house. Since we're moving the trail to the other side on the west side, I was just seeing there's a way right now. There's like a little storm drain, I guess, that goes over there.
Okay.
It yeah, it just bypasses walking down to Pecos.
Right. Yeah, well, we can look into that and see if there's a sliver of available property.
Yeah,
If it's all private, then very likely unlikely we can do that. But if there is some available public right away, we can look and see if there's a connectivity option there.
I have another question, unless you want to answer the question on the
Yeah,
chat.
go for it.
Are the trees right there behind in between I guess Riverton and Pecos, the new side that we're going to switching on, are those going to be demolished, or are they going to be remain the same, or how are the trees going to be?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Cassie.
Yep,
Looking for
I
that.
got that one too. Yeah, the majority of those ones are going to be preserved, especially the ones that are closer to the backside of those private properties. But there are trees that are closer to the existing channel that we will have to remove in order to do the floodplain work. But we are trying to save as many of those ones that are kind of further away from the channel as possible.
Okay.
And then as part of kind of Denver forestry requirements, trees that we take out, we have to plant in the neighborhood as well. So
Yep.
some of them might be directly in this project area, or some might be in other park spaces or other areas within the neighborhood, but they don't leave the area.
Okay. And then my last question on the new proposed low crossing, I guess pink, the purple pink color circle on Remington. Is there going so is along the trees are going to remain right there? Is there anything else that's going to be added during that stretch of late landscape right there, or is it just going to be the trail?
No, I think we'll look at adding amenities. We haven't really dialed into that detail of kind of like benches or pause points, things like
Mhm.
that. So there'll be some other amenities added along the corridor as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Yep. Thanks for your questions.
Adam, we got another one that came in from Jay. He asked if the lower water crossings, can they be kind of high? And then he gives a reason why. The existing ones are frequently run over or have debris from high water events.
Yeah, so we're aware of those issues and trying to design these to be, Aaron, feel free to jump in, but larger, bigger, better designed to handle those flows. I think those were probably built in the 70s or the 80s, and now we've got better information and design treatment. So they still are designed to be overtopped at certain levels, but should be improvements. Another one that's kind of south of Florida is definitely a big pain point for us on the maintenance side as well, of how much debris gets captured there and causes overflowing. So we'll be doing our best to alleviate some of those concerns, but we're limited with kind of how high we can build up because of I call them trickle down effects. Start adding grade, then it's harder to meet ADA, and then we're filling in the floodplain, and then we're causing other issues. So we're definitely trying to strike that balance of usability without causing additional flooding issues, which is one of the goals we're trying to reduce with this project. And yeah, Aaron, feel free to jump in if there's anything to add.
No, that was a great response, Adam. I don't think I have anything to add.
Hedman, feel free to. I see your hands up. And you are on mute, just in case.
Sorry. Yep, sorry. One more request, or see if possible. Is there any way we can make a official trail from like the Osage, and like back little, what do you call it, cul-de-sac to the trail? Like right now, there's like an unofficial trail right there, or since I guess we're moving the walkway, we won't have that anymore. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Not specifically for me, because I'm not sure which one of the cross streets is Osage. But yeah, I think in general we can, if you want to email me again with any kind of just Google screen grabs, otherwise we can just take a general look of like where some connectivity points could be added.
I actually, I never mind. The new trail will make sense. It doesn't need it. Never mind. Yeah, never mind.
Yes, real quick, are you referring to the north side or the south side?
The south side.
The south side, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Yeah, we can.
Sorry, Cassie, if I cut you off.
No, sorry, I cut myself off. We can look at that area.
And then in a similar vein, or kind of staying on Osage, Jay doesn't necessarily have a question, but he does have a comment of that it'd be great to have if there was a connection from the Gulch corridor to Ruby Hill Park, a sidewalk to connect Arkansas to Florida on the Osage Alley.
And that's, I don't know if you want to come off mute, but it's kind of this open corridor here just to the west of Osage. Is that what we're looking at?
And so Jay, we may need some clarification. So you're welcome to come off mute if you're able to, and just give us a little more context to make sure that we're able to respond on what may be possible.
This isn't Jay, but this is Jay, so I can kind of describe what he's talking about. There's an alleyway behind the houses on Osage, so just to the west of the houses on Osage Street, kind of where
Yeah.
the Excel corridor is. There's this like a social trail that runs off of where the Gulch Trail currently is, that cuts over to Florida and kind of connects with that trail that's on the west side of Ruby Hill Park. But that's kind of it, and it's not a great crossing there. Otherwise, people are looking at probably Osage or some of the other streets that are on the north side of the park.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think we know exactly what you're looking at, and we can talk about that. I know we've discussed it previously. I can't remember if that space has some weird ownership or what exactly it was, but we can definitely look at that.
At this time, those were the extent of the questions that we received, Adam. So I don't know if you want to wrap up or wait to see if there's any additional comments or questions that might come up.
Yeah, I think that's good. Thanks for all the questions. Went a little bit longer than I expected, but y'all had a lot of good questions. Aaron, yeah, appreciate you flipping to this slide. I saw Jesus put my email address and a link to the project on this page. So we'll be uploading documents and things there over the rest of this week, starting tomorrow, hopefully. And then, yeah, feel free to reach out if you are from any RNOs or neighbors. Again, you're welcome. Please share this stuff. We want people to be aware of what's happening and have interest in the project. It's a big one for us, and we're excited about these improvements. So yeah, thank you for joining, and enjoy your dinner or whatever else.
Thank you all
Thanks,
very
everybody.
much.
Thanks, everyone.